Hello, everyone. This is Glenn Hodges. Welcome to Chattanooga Self-Improvement Meetup, a mastermind group where we listen, learn, ask questions, and comment in an effort to help make each other the best version of ourselves, thus helping to make the world a better place in which to live. Our speaker this morning is our own Daniel Lucas. He earned a BS degree in Management of Information Systems from Dalton State and an MBA from the Michael J. Coles College of Business at Kennesaw State. Daniel is an enterprise application portfolio manager at Shaw Industries. He is a Six Sigma Black Belt and worked for 10 plus years as a full-time Kaizen and Lean Sigma Black Belt facilitator. His passion is helping people harness the power of personal injury. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Daniel. His topic today is developing your edge. And I'll let him tell you and what the rest of the title of the program is. Take it away, Daniel.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounding good.
All right. Daniel, I think you have a little bit of feedback coming through your mic, sir. Anyways, it's really interesting how I got asked to do this because I think it's kind of a chance thing. I don't know why Glenn would trust me to talk to this group because your time is very valuable and I didn't have anything planned. And we had an entrepreneur planned and he didn't show up, wasn't able to make it twice. And then I ended up taking over because I love coffee and wanted to inform everybody on my snobbery of coffee. And as a consequence, he said, well, now you get to speak at the next one. So I'm grateful to be here. I know that each and every one of you are interested in self-development and that you're ready to grow and you sacrificed something this morning to be here. And I take that very seriously. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you. Lisi will vouch that self-development is a passion of mine. And unfortunately, I don't know how to turn it off. Whether you're anywhere near the vicinity of me, whatever current concept or word that I'm thinking about that particular time or month, I'm just going to talk about it ad nauseum. So I did prepare some slides here. I'm going to go ahead and share those. And tell me, does everybody see this okay? Yeah, thumbs up? Okay.
Looks good.
All right, cool. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is this is the technology of sharing this PowerPoint is very beta. So just be aware, like I cannot click through bullets. It's going to show them all, and I hate doing that, but it was worth it to do it. If you want to get the most out of this time, and with the exception of you, Carmine, because you're driving, you're going to need a pencil and paper. And I'm not going to call you out or anything like that, but you'll probably get a little bit more out of the exercise because I'm going to challenge you. And this, the word that I had been thinking about for the last month, I always kind of think about different topics and what they apply to where I am in my life today. And whether it's something I came across in a book or just something I'm struggling with. And the word that I've been thinking about for the last month is inertia. And of course, the first thing, now that I'm older, I always want to know, like, what does this word truly mean? Because I like to keep things in context. And how do you leverage inertia? Because I'm the kind of person who I have a hard time like doing pivots. I have to think about things. I'm a very analytical person. But once I convince myself there's a new direction, I'm very hard to get off of pursuing that. So inertia is what I've sort of been thinking about. And when Glenn asked me I think it was a week ago, Glenn, you're like, what do you want to talk about? And I said, inertia. And he's like, yeah, you're going to have to do better than that. And I go, developing inertia. And he goes, no, that doesn't sound good either. And I was like, developing your edge by mastering inertia. He goes, okay, I can sell that. So I apparently got a couple of you here, and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to make sure that you get some value out of this. What is inertia? Why you need it? How does it serve you? And how to develop it? Now, there's the first thing I'm going to show you is this little thing I pulled off the web of what inertia is, because it's actually a little bit more complex. Because when I think of inertia, I used to think of that old analogy from the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, where you're spinning the flywheel. Okay. Um, Inertia means what is the current state that something is moving. So it could be stopped, it could be in motion. So, what I want to give you today as a listener of this is to look at emotionally and psychologically what is the inertia that you have in your life and how to make the most of it. Because I'm going to teach you there's a lot more to this, and that there's a lot of things you can do to actually impact it when at first glance most people will say it's beyond my control. So, first thing here, is change hard? Let me see, for those of you who are showing their cameras, and if you're not, a show of hands, is change hard? I see a couple. So I use this phrase all the time. And in fact, thanks for Julia. I see that trip. Thank you. I say this all the time. I'm like, change is hard. If I'm around my son who's 12 and the kid is like I mean, he'll be working on his dissertation in 2 or 3 years. He's way ahead of his time. Knows nothing about the real world, but he's always asking about really advanced topics. And I'm like, hey man, change is hard. Change is hard. I was preparing for this topic, and I had to stop. And as I said, like when I get to the root of a word or I'll say a phrase, I'll go, what does this phrase really mean? Well, when I wrote down change is hard when I was preparing for this, I had to stop and cross it out. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to challenge you, for everyone who rose their hand, which is probably everyone, and it would have been me last week. I'm going to challenge you and say that this is not true. And I want you to be skeptical, but I want you to be open-minded, because we're going to challenge that phrase right there. Change is hard. Okay? So, how many of you have a morning routine? Okay? And if you're here, and if you ever, like when we talk about self-development, we study the people who are movers and shakers in the world, and we go, how did they get to that point? What did they do? What do they do on a day-to-day basis that allows them to accomplish so much more than everyone else? Okay. And I pretty much assume if you're in this meeting, you're very astringent about how you spend your first few hours of your day. I I'm looking for thumbs up here. You guys, okay. So, for example, when I sent my bio because I was an ultra runner, and you had to manage every minute of the morning to make the most out of it, that you got everything in before breakfast. You got up at 4 a.m. Um, if you're if you're like a lot of self-development people, you get up, you do certain things so that when it's time to produce the work or get in a state of flow, you are ready. Okay? Now, here's my question for you. All right, this is that you guys should have. This is your first exercise on the pad and pen, because the change is hard is what I'm gonna push back and say. By the time you leave this, you're not going to agree with that statement. How hard would it have been today to not show up to this meeting? Okay, how hard would it be tomorrow to not get up at 5 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. to be extra productive? How hard would that be? I'm going to guess not very hard. If you think that you have magical willpower indefinitely, I would challenge that belief. So, tomorrow, let's say that you slept in. And let's say that the day after that, you did the same thing. What I would argue is you are changing, but you're not changing for improvement. You're changing towards what scientists call entropy. Entropy is the natural state that things go to when they're not managed, which, by the way, is considered to be chaos. If you want to think about an example, don't mow your lawn for a month. Don't clean your house for a month. Don't shower for a month. Things go towards chaos when they're not managed. So when we say, is change hard? What we're really saying is change towards improvement is hard. Change towards entropy, which is the natural state of chaos where you're not doing anything, that's easy. You don't have to do anything. It's the natural way. That voice on your shoulder, when you picture it, there's one taking you towards chaos and there's one taking you towards self-improvement. The one towards the self-improvement is always harder. Now, duh. A lot of you are saying, I knew changing towards harder was, but you just got some wording around it. What I want you to take away from it is use that feeling of challenge. When you start thinking about, man, this is hard, change is hard. If you utter those words and you find yourself feeling that, acknowledge that you're trying to change for the better, and this is the work that you have to put in. The resistance that you feel, treat it as a gift, okay? When you decide that you're going to start setting the alarm an hour early next week, and that you're committed to doing more things in the morning before everyone else, the resistance that you feel to slap the snooze button, that is you changing towards improvement and developing inertia. So that's the first principle I wanted to get to you today. I have some corny graphics in here. Most slides have more bullets than this, but I wanted you to have that takeaway of change because it ties into our theme of inertia here. All right. So when we think about a goal, what needs to change? That's the first thing in the core of my little thought circle here. This is not a licensed methodology or anything like that. This is just what I threw together. But I thought about when you think about change, the first thing at the core of that is what needs to change. So for anyone in this meeting, I'd like you to jot with your notepad. It doesn't have to be a real goal, but just jot down either something that you think you're already working on changing, or something that you aspire to, or make something up for the exercise. If it's to have extra money, if it's to lose weight, if it's to get a promotion, whatever your goal may be. So what needs to change would be the first question you need to ask. And here are some examples. I need to lose weight. I need more energy. I want to be healthier. I want six-pack abs. I want to be financially independent. I need to lose 10 pounds. I want access to more money. Here is my tip for you. Ask yourself, what prompted you in the first place to think you need change? Okay? That's part one. Here's my next circle. Why should it change? So you want to live a healthier lifestyle. And I chose health because it's a topic that I'm passionate about. But if anyone wants me to sort of give you examples of any other area, whether it's financial, relationships, career, I'm happy to expand on that. I happen to be passionate about health. I am passionate about financial stability as well. But here's some examples. I'm tired of living paycheck to paycheck. My diet and exercise decisions are placing my golden years at risk. And I will digress for 1 second there and say, do you know that the consequences for poor health decisions, do you know when they hit the most? At what age? Starting at age 60. Because the physical decline from someone who doesn't maintain their body and their mind, it's not that obvious till the age of 60. At the age of 60, if you've been putting in the work in your 40s and 50s, it's a whole lot easier to coast into your golden years on that work you've done. Think of how hard it is for someone in their 60s to pivot from an unhealthy lifestyle to someone who can be out and about. It's very difficult. So more argument that inertia is a good thing for you, sooner the better. I will not be able to afford extended travel as far as why you should change. This goes back to financial. This was a particular bullet point for me. I remember being about 33 and saying, I don't want to wait till I'm over the age of 67, which is the current, I think, retirement age. I said, I don't want to wait till I'm after 67 to be able to take extended travel around the world. I want to do that after the age of 50. So that was a personal goal of mine. And then with each one of these, have you guys noticed a trend with all these bullets? I'm getting more specific with each one, and we're going to talk about that. Notice this last one here. I said, in order to be, they're also bigger bullet points. It sounds like a mission statement. But in order to be an example to my family and peers and achieve the goals I want, I have to have abundance of health and energy. Now, notice the difference between I want to live a healthier lifestyle and then saying something specific like that, where you're saying, I'm going to be a leader, I'm going to be an example. The more specific that you are with each one of these questions that I'm going to challenge you with today, the more likely you are to succeed. I know that there's ways that there's exceptions to that where you can be too specific, but for the most part, ambiguous goals lead to varying levels of fulfillment. Meaning, if you're not specific about your goals, you're hardly going to feel fulfilled when you achieve them. And it's like that line in Alice in Wonderland where the cat says to Alice, "Which way do you want to go?" And she says, "I'm not sure." And then he says, "Well, any of these paths will do." So, when should it change? This is our third question that I want you to write down today. I want you to be thinking about, you've got this goal, whether it's real or not. Maybe it's something you have been working on. Now you have to put a date on it. Now, I have no issue telling you that I can spend my entire lifetime on these two right here and cleverly avoid this when question. The when is what separates a daydream from a goal. It's what makes it real. It's what locks that mind into gear and says, now we have a date. Folks, if you think, I used to be a music major. And one of the things I used to say about bands was the only time an album gets made is when there's a due date or they run out of money. That's the only time a band finally says this album is done. So when should it change? This is some examples of going again from vague to more specific. So I decided I'm going to start running tomorrow morning. I signed up for a 5K in 5 weeks. I want $10,000 in my savings account in 10 months. Now, back to what I said with the previous slide, ambiguous goals are accordingly fulfilling. Now, I kind of came up with that and I hope it makes sense, but the point being, if you're really vague, see those first 3 bullet points? Those are very vague. You can achieve those things and actually not have accomplished much at all. Going for a run tomorrow morning, signing up for 5K in 5 weeks, that is action, okay? Actions, a lot of times, are not necessarily productive, and that's the point of being specific with your goals, is it allows you to do what's called productive actions. So don't think that just because you're checking something off your list that it means you're making inertia towards your goal. So goals based on inspiration often lead to in terms of training, because I'm using training as my example for a lot of these slides, they often lead to injury. And I just signed up for a 5K in 5 weeks, or I'm going to run a half marathon with my friend. That's not a good strategy. You need to go back through all of these points and make sure they're answered. And then bad debt. Okay, so everybody thinks, I say everybody, that's a generalization. I'm better than that. A lot of people think, see this one right here? I want to have 10K in my savings account in 10 months. Now, I'm all for living beneath your means, but can you see how that could be a self-destructive goal? How about this? How about I put more on my credit card so I meet that goal? How about I put off some home maintenance repairs, like a leak in my roof, because I have committed to this goal of 10K in 10 months? The point is, you need to make sure the goal serves you and that it's worded correctly. So be careful with self-rationalizing. My children can tell you right off the top of their head what the definition of rationalizing is, because I make them say it all the time. And the answer is, it's when you tell yourself a story. Are you telling yourself? So I'll say, is that true, or are we rationalizing? That's a very common question I ask my children. And the first principle, for those of you who don't know Feynman, is he's actually one of my favorite scientists, Richard Feynman. Right there, the bottom bullet. The first point is that you must not fool yourself, and you are a very easy person to fool. Okay? Even Richard Feynman, who is this incredible scientist and philosopher, He designed the atomic bomb. He was the one, remember when the Challenger spaceship blew up? They sent him in, and he was the person who figured out exactly how the whole thing happened. I mean, that's amazing how someone can step into the wreckage and come back and say, it's because you launched when it was 10 degrees below these O-rings. The O-rings on the bottom of the ship, when the jet fuel came, it was too cold that morning, and they didn't expand correctly, and it caused a fuel leak. To this day, I remember when the challenge, that was one of the first times I ever saw something on TV that affected me. I was a kid when the Challenger exploded. Richard Feynman is the point of him being, me bringing up him is he's such an analytical thinker, yet at the same time, he's saying, be aware of your self-bias. Look at every situation and go, am I fooling myself here? Am I trying to hide something from myself? Bias is something I could easily eat up this whole lecture talking about. So then we get to the next one. How should it change? Okay, so that's the next thing you need to put on your notepad there. We're going through our list. How should it change? And here's some examples to give you some ideas. Well, how should it change? I signed up for a gym membership on January 3rd, which is around the corner. And I do not currently go to a gym. I've now kind of modified my house into one. But I will tell you, the January wave is not a stereotype. That thing is, every single year, that parking lot is absolutely packed in January. I opened a 401k last month. I'm going to start going to the gym 3 days a week. You see, again here, confusing action with progress. None of these things, having a gym membership or saying I will go to the gym or even saying I opened a 401k, none of those should be confused with progress. And the problem I have, this was a quote that I saw, if information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect six-pack abs. That's an entrepreneur, Derek Sivers. And his point was saying, just having information on what to do, like how to change, it doesn't actually serve you unless you learn how to apply it. So we just went through those 5 questions, okay? Now, here's my personal issue. Most people start with, how should I change? And that is not a good approach. And the reason that we're trained to look at that first is because it's what we are. If you open any running magazine, if you open Instagram, it's going to tell you, look at this picture, how should you change? And that person could have, a Tesla and a big house, and they go, in 6 months, this is how I changed. It could be someone with overweight and then six-pack abs. How did I change? You can change. You open any magazine, they're like 6 weeks to this. It's all about how you change, okay? Don't start there. How you change should only be answered when you've answered all these other questions as to what is it about you? How is this goal going to serve you? Why is it important? When it should take place? Don't just start with the how, because then you're copying someone else's plan and thinking it's going to work for you. So how much willpower do you have? This is another topic I could lecture on ad nauseum. Willpower is something that I am somewhat obsessed with as a topic. I think it's a very, very, it's a soft thing that they try to measure in so many ways. Scientists keep coming up with ways to measure our willpower. And what I will tell you is, based on the books that I've read and the conclusions I've come to, willpower is very finite, meaning you start the day and you end the day, okay? Your willpower almost never goes up during the day. With few exceptions, your willpower does not increase during the day. And if you think about scandals, stupid mistakes, where you just look at some powerful person and go, what were they thinking? Why did they do that? That was such a stupid thing. I know that person's brilliant. How many of those things happen before lunch? Almost none. Because when the day progresses, and let's say you're a very important person, you're a very responsible person, by the time you get to 8 o'clock, your willpower is exhausted. Okay? And this is why we binge watch in the evening and not as much during the days because your willpower is sunk at that point, and it's not going to recharge until you wake up. So be aware that willpower is a very important part of how you arrange your goals. Because when you think about what you need to tackle during the day to get you closer to your goal, you need to factor in when your willpower is at its peak. Okay? And hint, the morning is your best time. With few exceptions, the morning is the very best time to get the most out of your day. So with my advanced graphics here, I drew this. Your willpower is the slope, okay? And you can see that, and Carmine, I know you're driving, so I'll be happy to send you these slides, buddy. But your willpower is this slope, and you have your day starting just like we talked about. And this ball is my metaphor for progress, okay? The speed is the topic of this speech, which is inertia. And this is the end of the day right here. Your willpower determines the amount of slope that progress has. Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense to you, everyone. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if somebody. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for responding, everybody. Thank you, Julia. So here's what happens. January 1st, you say, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to go jogging. Okay? Your inertia, your willpower's in place. Here's your progress. This is the first block. Your alarm goes off at 5 a.m. Now, if you're anything like most people, and it's January 1st, and that alarm goes off at 5 a.m., you're going to get up and you're going to do it. Okay? But what happens when you break through that wall? Okay? Your progress right here, notice we went from 10 miles an hour to 5 miles an hour. So we got through it, but we're a little slower. This is what I mean by inertia. That's your inertia right there. And on this side, remember, on this side is achievement towards your goal. January 12th, these are 2 blocks. You stayed up late watching Netflix and it's 38 degrees and raining outside. You've now done this for a little less than 2 weeks. So maybe let's say out of 2 weeks, you've gone running for, 8 days, 3 days a week. This is 2 blocks. It's raining outside and you stayed up late. That alarm goes off at 5 a.m. If you're anything like most people, this is 2 hours later. Now, I've given people the benefit of a doubt here, but you can see what I did was I said the ball, which was your progress, it sat there for 2 hours and it may have tipped them over. So maybe there was some type of thing where you said, well, okay, I'm not going to go running, but I'll go downstairs and do a few stretches before my first cup of coffee and I'll sleep in half of the time. You did a compromise. Now, this is what happens when you're starting to find a rhythm. And by the way, anyone's welcome to weigh in on this, but most habit research says, depending on the habit, and I think that's probably the most important thing because people are like, well, it takes 30 days to make a habit. Well, it depends on the habit. But there's a lot of things that take less than 30 days. You don't believe me? Eat ice cream after dinner 3 days in a row and see how long that habit took to kick in. Because if you're anything like me, if I have it, I'm ready for it the next night. So external forces, this is our real life here because we're in the mastermind group here. I'm not speaking to college students. College students, their life is so much more finite. I'm not saying it's easy, but they have a schedule. They don't have as much job obligations. They don't have a bunch of children. They don't have in-laws coming to stay over for a week. These are the real life external forces when you are trying to accomplish your goal, okay? Do you see what happened to our progress ball there? It's sitting because now the blocks have lined up, okay? And our willpower can only give us so much weight. And as you can see, in this particular case, that one that one little progress ball is now starting to be tipped backwards and our willpower is sinking. So this is what call social scientist and Daniel Kahneman, who is probably one of the most prolific psychological researchers. He actually won a Nobel Peace Prize for his research on bias. He calls it regression towards the mean. I call it, in this particular example, rolling towards entropy. Entropy, as we talked about, is the natural state when you don't do anything, where it just chaos starts to happen. And you notice I made entropy a little like bucket here, because when you fall into entropy, it is very hard to get out. When you stop after 2 weeks of getting up to do your jog in the morning, or maybe you were saving your money every day because you're going towards that goal, you're getting up at 5 a.m. to pray and meditate and do this and that, or go for your walk. You take 3 or 4 days off because all this happened. Your job required extra of you. Your children were sick. You didn't get any sleep. You have other obligations. Your ball, which is the progress, goes back. Okay. And when I say back, notice there's a bucket here, because to get out of that bucket is going to be a whole lot more work than if we started back the next day. So now you've taken 2 weeks off. When you decide to start back and you say, no, it's February 30th. I know I had 2 good weeks and I'm ready to start back. Guess what? This is Murphy's Law. Those adversarial forces that kept you from succeeding in the first place, they're no longer the same size. Your job, your children, your sleep, and then your big one right here, your rationalization of avoiding change. And if you want to hear the voice in my head that I hear all the time, it's this one right here. This rationalization says, you don't really need to change. You're good enough as you are. Nobody cares but you. You already do so much more than this person or that person. Isn't that good enough? Okay, that's the voice right there that's taking you towards entropy. That's saying, just let it go. We are already doing it. I'm doing all I can. That's another one. I'm doing all I can. And if you ever read those books, or do you ever hear movers and shakers say, I'm doing all I can? No, they're like, I can do more. And it's like that old phrase, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. Because people who are interested in change, they'll find a way. And when you say, I'm doing all I can, there's nothing else I can do, what you're doing is you're programming your brain to shut down opportunities that arise. So when you go towards entropy, understand this loss of inertia, the consequences, they're multiplied every day, whether you participate or not. I'm going to go back one real quick. This is what I meant by change is not always hard, because change towards entropy is easy. All you have to do is just don't do anything. So how do we stack the odds in our favor? How do we get to where we have a much better chance that when adversity strikes, and as anyone who's ever tried to accomplish anything meaningful in their life knows, count on adversity. If you're doing the average and you're only doing what's expected of you, you're probably not going to have massive adversity. If you want massive adversity, you have to go for something that's beyond your comfort zone. The way that I would suggest today that you start focusing on taking out the big adversity is you stack the odds in your favor by making sure that you have all of these questions with detailed answers. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm an ultra runner, okay? I'm not doing it this year, but in previous years, I started running when I was 30. I had never ran before then. And then in my mid 30s, I found the trails and was like, wow, this is amazing. And I started running races from 50 miles to 100 miles. And I did one that was 120. But the point is, if I didn't know the answers to these questions, I'm going to tell you, it is so much easier to quit. Because if you're there just because your friend asked you to be there, there's going to be a point where it's not fun anymore. Hell, a marathon, which is 26.2 miles, you'll find a reason at mile 20 to drop out of that race and be like, if you aren't committed. When you talk about things like 50 miles in the woods by yourself and beyond that, or 100K, if you don't know why you're supposed to be there and why it's important for you to finish, that that those walls that you saw, they will shut you down, and they'll shut you down quick. This is our real world here, okay? Now, this is a really corny graphic, but the only reason I kept it in here was because I thought of Egyptians. Now, the pyramids, which in my opinion is one of the most amazing things that have ever been accomplished. How they hauled that rock across the desert and built those structures that to this day are still level. I think about this. I like to give them the benefit of a doubt, that the people who built it, but I like to think that when they were moving those rocks, spent their entire lifetime moving those massive boulders across the desert, that they were thinking, I am serving a higher purpose here. This is bigger than me. Now, there's also the chance that they were just like, I don't want to get hit with the whip. So whichever one of those two it fell into, I like to think that when it comes to real world challenges, this is our everyday life. And anytime that you're taking on a bigger goal, this closet is larger. And it is forceful uphill push. So one of the most famous short distance runners that was Americans in the 60s and 70s was Steve Prefontaine. And he was kind of like the James Dean of running. He popped on the scene. I'm sure, Glenn, you remember Steve Prefontaine, like he made it to the Olympics, and he lived a very short life, but he was here to make it. He was here to give it his all. And this is probably one of the most passed around phrases in running, which is to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. And by the way, I love the phrase. I don't want to take anything away from him. But what I want to say is this: that is inspiration. Okay. And when we think about inspiration, and you watch for example, let's say you watch a Rocky movie and we get inspired, it doesn't mean that it's a good idea next day to go spar or start training to be a fighter. Or I know a lot of people who watch Rocky and they're like, I'm going to start running tomorrow. Okay. Inspiration, remember. Yeah, nice, Kelly. Yeah, that's a good one. Corey Green, David Goggins, I've read his books, and apparently when he used to do these exercises in his bedroom where he would do 1,000 push-ups. And it took him like a long time. He would take little breaks in there, but he wouldn't stop until he'd done 1,000. And he would play the Rocky theme on loop for like 2 hours while he did those push-ups. He was a beast. So the point is, inspiration, like the Steve Prefontaine thing, okay? Inspiration is only one ingredient in you getting that inertia that we want here at the bottom. Inspiration, it comes quick and it leaves quick, okay? Because inspirations might get you through one of those blocks, but when you have 3 or 4 of those blocks that are stopping your progress, you're going to need to know exactly what is it inside of you. And when I say intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, it means you had better have answered those questions from the larger ball, the why, the when. You need to know those right off the top of your head. Because when adversity strikes, you need to go into that state and go, I said that I was going to do this by this date because I want to do this. And it should not just be, I'm listening to some good music and I thought it would be fun to do it. If that helps you along the way, I totally encourage you to do it. I'm simply stating that in and of itself is not enough to get through hard adversity. So ask yourself, when you think about a goal, hey, thank you for attending, Aram. When you ask yourself about a goal, ask yourself, what do I need to commit daily in order to achieve it? So when we come up with these massive goals, okay, if we look at things that are going to change us and we say, first of all, don't just start with the how, which I think that's the worst place to start, which is where most people start. They go, well, I'm just going to do it by breaking this savings goal into this many days or whatever. I think the key here is look at your daily goal and say, what can I accomplish daily? I was listening to an interview with Michael Phelps. Now, listen, I think he's one of the greatest athletes who's ever lived. He's also very like, it's the sport. He'll be the first to say, focusing on that sport, it took away from the rest of his life dramatically. It's not something most people would want to endeavor on. But Michael Phelps, one of the things I thought was really interesting, because I used to be a triathlete, was he talked about 1 day out of the water takes me 2 days of swimming to catch back up. And he was exactly right, because I remember when I would take weekends off, when I was starting to be a competitive swimmer, when I would take weekends off, it would take Monday or Tuesday for me to start finding my stroke again. And that is a great example of inertia, because when you aren't progressing on something and you slack for a few days, it's a whole lot harder to come back. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. Let's start with the micro goals. We're going to come back to that example, though, of what we talked about with Phelps. So when we talk about micro goals, this I borrowed this bit from Atomic Habits by James Clear. I think I read a lot of self-dev books. That was my favorite book last year. If you get nothing else from this speech, go out and get Atomic Habits. It is a no fluff, no sales pitch. It is a straight, clear, this is how you change your habits. And it's a great book. But one of the tips on there is micro goals. And micro goals are the kind of things that sound like a complete waste of time, but the important thing is that they're in place, okay? So for example, if you say, I'm gonna do 5 push-ups a day. Now, let's be truthful. What you're doing, if you say, I'm only gonna do 5 push-ups a day, is you're building the part of your brain that says, I do this every day. That's more important to me as an older athlete. Consistency is way more important than 30 days to 50 push-ups type thing, because consistency is going to establish habit. You get the habit, you have inertia. 10K steps a day, that's another micro goal. It doesn't take a lot to do 10,000 steps a day. It just makes sure that you didn't stand around too much during that day. You just go for maybe a leisurely walk and then stay
Atomic
active.
Habits.
Yes, Atomic. I have a copy of it right
According
here.
to Google Books, the phenomenal international bestseller 1 million copies SOLD transform your life with tiny changes in behavior, starting now. People think that when you want to change your life, you need to think big.
Hey, thanks, Maurice.
Sorry.
No problem. All right,
Sorry.
so goals on, that's all right. Goals on building inertia here, micro goals. Here's an example. You put 1% of your gross money into your 401k every 6 months, and you increase that by 1%. Now, you might say, well, that's not a lot. I need to save a lot of money. Well, guess what? Doing that in small increments, science has shown time after time again, and Tony Robbins is big on this in his book, Finance. People, when you're pulling your money out before you get it, you adapt. And how many times do you hear when you're trying to tell somebody who's never saved money, they say, I can't afford to save money, okay? If you're taking 1% out of your gross income, you're not going to notice it. If you take it up to 2% by the end of the year, you're not going to notice it. It's that small incremental change that's going to get you closer to the goal. And what you find is after 20 years of that, now you've consistently put in so much in your 401k. Your 401k has inertia. It's no different than physically training. For example, I coach a few athletes. I do it because I love to see people develop and grow. And I don't do it very often anymore, but one of the things I teach those athletes is there's technically, yeah, go right ahead, Kelly.
Daniel, I love what you're saying about this. Many years ago, when we were raising 3 children and looking for jobs in 2008, I still have PTSD. I told my husband, no matter what, we're going to put $5 a week into the savings account. And he said, you're crazy. It's a waste of money. $5 means nothing. And it's exactly what you're talking about, because when everything else seemed awful, we saw that little tiny $5 build up and build up. And even though we put more into savings now, we still move that $5 every month. And last year, we are not fancy people, if you will. Last year, we had saved enough to where we were able to take a Viking cruise to Italy. So there is just tremendous mental shift when you do something. And I always tell young people, throw $5, just $5, and you get that momentum. So I love what you're saying. It's really good.
Yeah, and Kelly, I would bet that when you put money in today, you look back and go, how hard was it for us to do that $5 all those years ago? This is nowhere near that hard. And I'm certainly in that boat. When I give up something for my savings now, I go, what am I giving up compared to what I was giving up 20 years ago? It's not even close. For example, Julia mentions a book here called the Latte Factor. Lisi had actually had that book and read it and shared it because it's very much the same principle. You take that price of that latte and start investing it, but it's micro goals. Now, from a physical training perspective, I'm going to go against the grain here and say I don't believe in off days. And so what I mean by that is when you're training, let's say you're training for a marathon, yes, you don't need to run every day. But what I tell people is that same time that you're running, I expect you to go walking. Okay. So for example, if one of the athletes I'm coaching, there's 2 days a week where he does not run. And I say, no, you're going to do one of two things during that time. You're either going to walk the dog, walk with your girlfriend, or you're going to lift weights. It's your call, but you're not going to run, but you're going to do other things. And you might say, why not just take the whole day off? I'll tell you. If you're training, and let's say you're getting up at 5 a.m., okay? And you say, in order to achieve the goals I want with my career, I have to be up by 5 a.m. and I have to be producing, okay? You decide on weekends, I do whatever I want. So you stay up past midnight, you sleep until 10. How much harder is it to get back in on Monday because you did that? So it's no different in the physical arena. If I tell somebody, no, on your off day, you just sit on the couch. You just completely rest and don't do anything. It is so much harder and it's worse for you because the body does not recover well when you stay in a static motion. Okay. What was I going to say? Motion equals emotion. So when you're in motion, you have much more control over your emotions. That's what I do when I'm struggling. I move around, I walk, and I go, I got to take control of this. You think about people who can't take control of their emotions. What do? They slump their shoulders and they sit in a corner. They don't want to move. You got to take control of your body, then you can take control of your mind. So example of micro goals there, and I call it boiling the frog. For those of you who don't know, if you put a frog in water and you turn the temperature up slowly, yeah, one bite at a time, Dan Hall. I couldn't see the rest of your comment there. Maintain consistency, yeah. So one of the tricks that writers do is they say, all I have to do is write 50 words a day. Now, you're not going to make a lot of progress writing 50 words a day. The point is that once you start typing, immediately, you're like, oh, I don't have to stop now. I'm going to journal 3 sentences. What happens when you start journaling 3 sentences? You journal a lot more. So micro goals mean you make the goal small enough that it makes you start, but it's not overwhelming, okay? Inertia here. So going back to those micro goals, think about it this way. Discipline equals freedom. And this is something, and I don't like to typecast the millennials because there are very productive millennials. There are ones that fit the stereotype and whatever. I don't like to typecast. But one thing I have definitely gotten pushback from a younger generation is, why is discipline equal freedom? And to be completely fair, I thought it was stupid when I was young, and people would say discipline equals freedom. Discipline equals freedom means, what have we been talking about this entire lecture? Okay? We're saying by building up that inertia, you are much more likely to get your goals. And you might say, well, yeah, but you got to get up at 5 a.m. and you got to go run and you got to do all this stuff because you're disciplined. And I don't want to do that. I want my freedom. Well, guess what? I have the freedom to do nothing if I want to. How hard is it for me to do nothing? Not that hard. So why do it? And anytime I want to take a day off, I can. But I enjoy the freedom that the discipline gives me. And you might say, well, what kind of freedom do you have? Well, I'll tell you what kind of freedom I have. If I want to go hike for a day and do an active vacation on a bike, I can go do it. I'm not limited. From a financial perspective, because you've put those things in place and Kelly has been putting the $5 away, she gets to go on the Viking cruise now. Because the discipline that she gave herself gives her the freedom to choose a vacation. No $5 in the bank equals no Viking cruise. And quite frankly, the best way to spend your money is to build memories. It's not to own things. I think if you want to look back at your life when you're 80, you're going to go, man, and I'm not, for example, you might be a car collector. I don't have anything against collecting cars. If it brings you joy and it makes memories with you, go for it. But I always look at things and go, what's going to create when I'm planning vacations with the kids or my wonderful woman, Lacey, I think, what's going to give us the best memory here? Okay. And by the way, oftentimes that's not the most expensive vacation. There's a lot of times where I go, this is going to create the best memory. What she would probably argue is that some of those memories aren't good. They're just very powerful memories, like going camping in the woods. Some of her memories are really strong about that. They're not necessarily good memories. Discipline equals freedom. There was a social psychologist, I think he's a Harvard professor actually, and he was wanting to learn how to play the guitar, and he had a guitar, and what he found was he never played it. So he put the guitar right in front of the television. And this is actually something I do. If you know me, I keep my guitar in front of my television. And what it triggered was, now that guitar is in front of the TV, I'm much more likely to play it because I can see it. And what some self-development gurus would call this is putting success in your way, meaning it's actually harder to avoid being successful because you put things in your way to where you have to do it. You have to stare at that guitar. Well, the second thing he did when he wasn't practicing enough was he took his TV remote and put it upstairs in a closet. Now, if you want to watch something, you just go to the closet and grab the remote. But because it wasn't sitting right there by the TV, he just reached for the guitar at the end of the day. Now, going back a few slides, remember what I said about willpower being lower as closer you get to the evening, willpower goes lower and lower. We're going to get into this, but simple rules is a way that you can protect yourself from your willpower. So here's a couple of simple rules. If there's no junk food in the house, you're saving yourself a lot of thought. And I do the grocery shopping, and the most important time for your willpower to be strong is when you are grocery shopping, as far as staying healthy. And for years, I used to have guys come up to me and say, I want to get healthy, but my wife and kids, they love junk food. And I said, whatever you do, make sure that the person who buys the food for your house is on board, is enrolled in what you're trying to accomplish. Well, she does the grocery shopping. I said, I don't think you understand. If it gets in that cart, it gets in your belly. There's no way around it. So every time that Little Debbie's are $1, man. Junk food is cheap. You put that in your cart, you're putting it in your belly. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not saying don't splurge, but this goes back to discipline equals freedom. So when you have the discipline to say, I'm not going to put this in my cart because then it goes in my body. If you have that discipline, it's going to give you the freedom to live a healthy life. And by the way, there's nothing keeping me from getting junk food whenever I want it. I can go drive and get it if I need to. I just don't keep it within arm's distance. And it makes my life a lot easier at the end of the day when my willpower is low. Rewards for progress. This is very, very, very slippery slope. And I am going to go, this is another thing where I'm a controversial person. And the most common thing I hear when from people at the gym is, dude, I worked out so hard today. I'm going out to get pizza. I did a run today, so I'm having a beer and some ice cream. Rewards are a slippery slope. And what I want you to do is when you design your rewards, and I am telling you to do rewards, but I want you to go back to those 4 questions that we did and say, how does this reward align with what I'm trying to accomplish? Who and what am I trying to become? And how does that reward bring me closer to being that person? So instead of the dessert after workout, I give you an example. I hated spinning on a bike or the elliptical in the mornings when I was training for triathlons. So I would just watch junk TV. I would put a Netflix show on of a dumb show that I would feel guilty wasting my time watching. And I would watch that show while I was spinning on the bike. Not as much as I love self-development audiobooks and stuff, spinning on the bike is not the place for them. It's like your body's already being taxed. My willpower is low. So that's an example of a way where I go, I can binge watch that show as long as I'm doing the work. You get up, let's say you're getting up at 5 a.m. We talked about the consequences of blowing that schedule every weekend and trying to get back in the routine. How about this? How about you get up at the same time, but then you go to your favorite coffee shop with a book? Okay. Or maybe you go for a walk with your family. But the point is, it's okay to do rewards, and I love rewards, but make sure they're encouraging the goal that you're trying to accomplish. When you have a reward, and that reward is the exact opposite of what you're trying to accomplish, I mean, it's almost like, you successfully did Alcoholics Anonymous for 2 months. Now reward yourself with a cocktail. So think about how that goal is going to align with what you're trying to accomplish, and then base your rewards on that. So I think this is one of my last slides, but factor in your personality. You guys don't need to read this book, but there's something called Gretchen Rubin's 4 Tendencies. And I think you can take the test for free online. But probably an even better example is the Enneagram. But what I want you to know is when you think about goals and you go through those things that you wrote down today on that piece of paper, one of the most important things that I'm really shocked nobody talks about, and this even includes Atomic Habits, and Charles Duhigg wrote a book called The Power of Habit, and they don't address this, okay? And what I'm trying to tell you is, and by the way, she doesn't really address it as much either, but I think there's a big gap between saying how to effectively build habits that are going to help you and what is your personality. Because not all approaches towards habits are going to be the same for everybody. So one of the things I took from this book was you had 4 personalities, and the Enneagram is probably, like I said, an even better example. But for example, a rebel, they're the kind of person that says, I got to do something because someone said I couldn't, and I got to break all the rules. And if I'm not breaking the rules, I'm not interested. Okay. I'm actually an obliger, by the way, which I meet outer expectations, but I struggle with my own inner expectations. And one of the things that is big to me as an obliger is I always love serving people. I love doing things for other people. So when it's a goal that I came up with and nobody cares, I have a hard time meeting it because I'm like, well, this isn't really necessarily, I don't have an accountability to someone else, so I'm less interested. Glenn asking me to speak today is an external obligation, so I prepared for it. So what's an example of how you would leverage someone like me? Meaning I love, if I'm accountable to someone else, I do not want to let them down. That is one of my primary motivators. Well, one of the tips that I read the other day was if you have a training partner, what they would do is these 2 training partners is at the end of the workout every day, one of them took one of the shoes of the other person. So now you have one of your shoes and the other person. Guess what happens if you don't show up to the gym tomorrow? The other person doesn't have their shoe. So it's on you. And you have to live with it. So you talk about how does that apply to inertia? Well, think about if your accountability is one of your primary motivators, how much easier is it to not hit that snooze button on that alarm because you're like, I've got their shoes. They're not going to be able to work out unless I take it to the gym. So even if I don't want to work out, I still have to take it to the gym. So they're waiting on me. For someone like a rebel who's always trying to break away from the pack and say, I want to do things my own way. If someone says do it this way, I'm going to do it the other way. One of the things I would argue if you're a rebel is shoot for consistency. In other words, rebels don't tend to be consistent. They tend to go all out, get burnt out, and sometimes even if they accomplish the goal, they burn out and then they quit and go do something else. One of as kind of a health person, you'd be surprised at when some of these Hollywood people get in shape for a role, or what is the name of that magician? David, I can't think of his last name, but he does these amazing things of discipline.
David Copperfield?
No, not David Copperfield. That's a
David
little older.
Blaine.
David Blaine. David Blaine. So he does these amazing acts where it requires massive amounts of discipline, where remember he stayed in a block of ice for like 20 days and just sat inside of a block of ice, no food, nothing for 20 days. And I think he had water from the ice or whatever, but he's an example in some of these Hollywood examples of they're rebels. They go way, way, way out there. And as soon as the thing's over, they totally let themselves go. Like they have to have some external force shake them off like 6 months later and say, you have to get back together. So with a rebel, what I would say is if that's your modus operandi, shoot for consistency. And one of the best examples I've heard of consistency, man, is Jerry Seinfeld. And this is before he was super, super famous. He was big on the stand-up. Comedians were asking him on a regular basis, how do you get so good? And his answer to them was, every day that you write jokes, you put an X on the calendar. Never let there be a gap in that chain. He said, you should never have a day where there's not an X on that calendar. And your prolific writers, for example, even though they may not work a full day every day, they still write every day because they're like, it's so much more work if I take 3 or 4 days off to get back in the routine and start all over again. So don't break the chain is my example for people who are like all in or all out. Shoot for something that's a little more consistent. As someone who's an older, I'm 43 now, so as I'm in the older athlete group, I value consistency over intensity any day. Any day, I'll say, I can get you to the marathon line, and we're not going to do it for someone who's coming off the couch, for example. I'm like, there's no way we're going to do that in 100 days. But if you give me 200 days, I'll get you there healthy. You know, you accomplishing this and finishing that marathon, and then your shin splints and knees are shot and hips, and you had to walk the last 5 miles. That's not a great goal. It's not going to serve you. Yes, I know you saw that in a magazine, and it says, here's how you do that in 100 days. Or your friend signed up for a scenic marathon, and you guys thought it'd be a fun trip together. Remember what I said? They didn't go through all that list. They went straight to the how and circled that. So go through the exercises, ask yourself those questions, and it's going to serve you well. So with that, this is it. I will have time for questions. Don't skip the homework when you're coming up with your big goals. And remember, Murphy's Law is always part of your planning process. Murphy's Law was those blocks on the inertia that says, we are going to stop you from growing. We are going to do our best to keep you from growing.
Well, thank you there, Daniel.
Yeah.
Boy, you gave us a lot to think about. I have, do most of you agree with me that this is a new way for looking at setting goals and achieving great things? Did you learn something? Who would like to share? Maurice, you're nodding your head.
Well, absolutely. It tells me that I need to revoke my membership in the Procrastinators Club.
Well, I thought you revoked that a year or so ago. I think Dan Hall worked with you on that. You didn't backslide, did you?
Yes, I did. And it's like staying focused on a goal, willpower, and most of all, being reasonable about the goals that you set. Oh, me being reasonable about the goals that I set, not someone else.
Well, Maurice, I wasn't picking on you when I said something about backsliding. I would like to hear the first person that can tell me they have never been a backslider. I bet even Daniel Lucas cannot say that he has never been a backslider at some point.
I backslid this morning, Glenn. I hit the snooze one more time than I should have. I would have had a little more runway if I had just sort of gotten going earlier.
Yeah. Corey
Well,
Green.
let me ask the question.
Yeah.
How much of a difference is it between backsliding and a change of direction?
It's huge.
A course adjustment.
It's huge, and because a course adjustment is, and many times it's strategic towards your growth. You'll notice when I talked about being specific about your goals, you may start getting towards that goal and go, this goal no longer serves me in the way I thought it would. And then you change course. Backsliding is more going towards entropy, where you're just doing nothing. Okay. Backsliding is saying, I'm no longer, I don't have the fire in me. I don't want to change. I'm going towards entropy. Pivoting, that's strategic. You still have the inertia with you when you
Right.
pivot. When you're backsliding, you're saying, I'm not going to put in the work and maybe something good will happen. You're relying
So
on hope.
in my case, I'm gonna change that. I'm not backsliding. I changed course.
You got it.
You know, you mentioned actors and movie stars a while ago, and you know, one of my favorite actors of today is Tom Hanks. Think of the weight he has gained and lost in order to play a particular character. What do you think that's going to do to his health long term?
Are you asking me, Glenn?
Yeah, you're the pro.
He's had lots of health problems. He was diagnosed with diabetes 7-8 years ago.
And I think, wasn't he the one that was in a foreign country that ended up with COVID also?
Yeah, he's
I
one of the
think he was
first.
in Australia.
He's one of the first people.
Yeah, but
Glenn, I've got a question, Daniel. I'm curious as to why you use the word inertia, and I didn't hear you use momentum.
Okay, you broke up a little there,
The
Marsha.
power of building momentum.
Okay, I think
You use inertia, not momentum.
Yeah, and that is because momentum to me is much more easy to gain in a daily basis, and inertia means what is something that's maintained every single day. It's already in that motion. So momentum is where you're actually you're speeding up and you're going, and inertia is your default state. So how do you change it to where your default state is, I'm going to break through those blocks? Momentum is, to me, how much speed do you have today? Okay, it's more temporary. Inertia is more, what is the state of things today, given all things? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Right.
Overall in our lives, it's a great position to feel the momentum and to ride the momentum because you've built it. And anyway, but I understand what you're saying. It's a very interesting thought process.
Yeah. So I think if I were to put it into more statistical terms, inertia is your baseline, and then momentum is what you can do above and below your baseline. Because momentum is easier to gain and lose. Okay. But inertia is something that takes you months and years to build up. And it also, as a consequence, takes you months and years, in most cases, to lose it. Momentum to me is more temporary.
Greg is one of our, I'm sorry, Marcia.
I'm good.
Greg is one of our younger members of the group. What's your biggest takeaway for today?
I think my biggest takeaway was not taking a day off. So, because I'm mostly thinking about, when I heard your presentation, something I'm working on right now, which is learning another language, the second time I've done it after English. And I noticed that recently I took, when you take one day off, it's easy to just not pick it up again the next day and the next day. So Yeah, I would say that that was my biggest thing. Even if you're training for something, yeah, of course you need to rest a bit, but to still walk, like you said, just continue doing something every day.
Well, I believe let's see, you're fluent in French and now you're working on Portuguese, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one of the earlier members of another program I had, Motivation Here, is from Portugal. And he was supposed to be with us today, but his mother is suffering from COVID. He's traveled a lot like you have. He stayed in Thailand for a long time, and then he spent several years in the UK. And I met him I think I met him in Denver back in about 2012 or something like that. Uh, let's see, it's 9:30, folks. It's that time. It's boy, this has been powerful, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
Lisi, so glad to have you with us. I think you've already dropped off though, but tell her thanks for joining us. And
Yeah.
you tell her I did pronounce her name correctly, finally.
Fine.
It's Lisi, not Lisa. And let's see, Kelly, Tom Glenn is going to have we come up with a title for his talk yet?
It's funny you say that. I got an email from his assistant today, and they'll be working on that, but he's going to be sharing about his business experience, how he's grown Elders Hardware. And then y'all get ready, because I think my mom is going to join him. She has worked for Ace Hardware for 40 years. And I'm just going to ask for grace that day. Will you just give me some grace? Because who knows what she will say. I'm sure she will keep it entertaining once she gets over her nerves. But I'm excited about the opportunity. But y'all, please, grace. I got to have some grace that day.
It's going to be good. We may learn some things about you, Kelly.
That's the worry.
And the date that Tom is speaking is January what?
I believe it's the 9th. Does that sound right?
I believe it is.
Look at my
January
calendar.
9th.
Actually, it would be the 5th, wouldn't it?
The 5th. All right. Okay. I wasn't looking at the calendar. So he'll be our first speaker of 2021. That sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? 2021. I still want to say 19 something. Jonathan, thank you for being with us today. And Julia, I think there were some other new ones. We'd love to have you become regulars if you see value here. We have other great speakers. Some, it's hard to match what Daniel shared with us today. But if you'll just go into meetup.com, or if you'll just Google Chattanooga Self-Improvement Meetup, and just ask to join the group, and I'll put you in. There's a question there of have you attended? If so, who was the speaker? So it'll be real easy for you to answer. I typically don't put people in until they have attended one of the masterminds and they know what it's like. So we also have a Facebook group, the official Chattanooga Self-Improvement Mastermind. So if any of you would like to friend me on Facebook, it's just Glenn Hodges. You can find me at either Glenn Hodges, GLYNNHODGES, or Glenn Hodges Coach. Folks, we're running over. Thank you. I love each and every one of you. I care about you. And remember, your day will be just as good as you visualize it.